Good morning, everyone. This week's Torah portion talks about the garments of the high priest, the 8 beautiful priestly garments. And there's a story in the Talmud that there was once a Gentile who came to Shammai, the great Rabbi Shammai. He knocked on his door and he said, I want to convert to Judaism so I could become a high priest. And I could wear these beautiful 8 garments, the wardrobe of the high priest. Shammai slammed the door in his face. What a ridiculous request. You want to convert to Judaism and become a high priest? Even a Jew can't become a high priest. You have to be a Kohen, and then you have to be selected a high priest. So when he went next door to Hillel's house, and he said the same request, I want to convert to Judaism so I could become a high priest. So Hillel said to him, okay, if you want to become a high priest, first go learn all the laws of priesthood, of the kahuna, of the high priest. So he said, fine. He's on the way to becoming a high priest. Go learn the laws. He started studying. Then he came across the law that a non-Kohen cannot become a priest, a Kohen or a high priest. So he went back to Hillel. He says, is this true that even an Israelite cannot become a Kohen? He says, yes. He says, even if King David tried to become a high priest, he couldn't because he's from the tribe of Judah. He's not from the tribe of Levi. So he said, I guess I can't become a high priest, but now that I started discovering the beauty of Judaism, I want to continue on my journey. And he continued his journey, he became a Jew, and he thanked Hillel for leading him on this journey. And the question is, what's the story teaching us? And I think the story is teaching us that sometimes people seem to be attracted to something superficial, like the beautiful garments of the high priest. But Hillel was able to see, unlike Shammai who rejected him, Hillel was able to see, what does he really want? He wants a deeper connection with God. And therefore, let me help him find that connection. When he realizes it's not through becoming a priest, but becoming a Jew, he'll become a Jew. Sometimes we turn people away, we reject them out of hand, but sometimes we have to read between the lines. We have to see the deeper motivation, why they're asking what they're asking for. Don't just listen to what they're saying, try to understand where they're coming from, which is really what this week's parsha is all about. It's about the olive oil. When you look at an olive is bitter. If you taste an olive, it's bitter. But if you squeeze the olive, you get the pure oil, which is sweet. And the idea is we all have an outer shell, which is the external facade, but we all have pure olive oil inside of us. And when we see people, we shouldn't just look at the husk. We shouldn't look at the shell. We shouldn't look at the external bitter component. We should find the oil, which is the purity of the soul, the deeper, proper motivation that every person has. And that's why today is the 7th of Adar. It's the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was born and died. It's Adar Rishon, the first Adar. Moshe Rabbeinu is emes. Moshe emes. The Torah so emes. What is the idea of emes? Emes is what permeates the essence. A lot of this world, by the way, in the Zohar, is called Alma de Shikra, the world of falsehood. Because the majority of this world is false. That's what the Zohar says. The next world is called Alma de Kshot, the world of truth. In the next world, we'll see what the true reality is. What we think is reality is not reality. We have a very superficial, external idea of what truth is. We always have to go beyond the olive, squeeze out the pure olive oil to find the truth. Just share with you a story I heard recently. There's a rabbi in Israel, a great rabbi, his name is Rabbi Scheiner, a holy man. One day a 15-year-old boy came to him and said, Rabbi, can I have your siddur? He had a siddur he used his whole life, 80 years. Worn out, say that he said all this praise. He says, I bought you a new one. I'll give you a brand new one, the same one. Let me have yours. So Rabbi Scheiner said, why do you want my siddur? He says, I'll tell you, I have a hard time with prayer. I have a hard time focusing, concentrating. If I use your prayer book, your siddur, it will help me in my kavanah, in my concentration. Scheiner said, absolutely. He handed him the beautiful siddur, his siddur that he prayed with his whole life, and he took his new siddur. The grandson of Rav Steinman sees this 15-year-old boy walking out with Rav Steinman's siddur. He says, what are you doing? He says, your grandfather gave it to me. He says, impossible. What do you mean? He says, I'm telling you, I told him I would like it, and he gave it to me. He says, it can't be. We had a rich man from America who came here a few years ago. He offered to make $1 million donation to the yeshiva if he gives him his siddur. And Rav Steinman said no. So there's no way he gave it to you. Wait here. He went into his grandfather. He says, is it true you gave the siddur to the 15-year-old boy? He said, yeah. He said, why did you give it to him? He said, the boy said he'll be able to pray better if he uses my siddur. So I gave it to him so he could pray better. He said, but a few years ago you told a man who wanted to give $1 million to yeshiva, you won't take his money for the siddur. You didn't want to part with it. He said, that rich man wanted my siddur because he thought that this siddur is going to bring him more blessings. God will hear his prayers. He'll make bigger business deals. He'll become wealthier. He wanted to use my siddur as a form of idolatry, as though the prayer book is going to bring him the blessings rather than his prayers. I'm not selling my siddur for idolatry. This boy wanted to get the siddur so he could pray with more concentration. For that, I'll give the siddur. That's emes. That's truth. When you say, are your motives pure? If your motives are pure, go ahead. If your motives are not pure, I don't want to give it to you. In life, there's so much falsehood, so much superficiality. We have to look beyond the external. I'll just conclude by saying that, one of the biggest companies in America became it became the richest company. I think it's worth $1 trillion. Is Apple computers. And it's fascinating. What is the symbol of Apple computer? First of all, they chose the name Apple, which is unbelievable. Why did they choose the name Apple? And what's their logo? Every time you see Apple computer, you see an apple with a bite in the apple, right? How did they come up, Steve Jobs, with this image of an apple being bit into? He doesn't know why he came up with it, but let me tell you why he came up with it. Because the first sin was Adam HaRishon took a bite out of the apple. And ever since he took a bite out of the apple, there's no more purity in the world. There used to be pure innocence in the world. Once they ate from the apple, there's good and bad mixed into everything. That's why they realized they were naked once they ate from the apple, because suddenly there was the sense of sin and vulnerability and the sense of shame and the sense of improper thoughts, and suddenly they realized they were naked. Before that, all their thoughts were holy. And the Apple computer, which is the biggest company in the world, first company in America to reach $1 trillion, every time you see that symbol, remind yourself, this world has been tainted by the bite in the apple, and therefore everything is mixed with good and bad. Everything people do and say has mixed motives. And the goal of life is to find the Torah, which is Moshe Rabbeinu who gave us the Torah, to find the emes, to squeeze out the pure oil from the bitterness of the olive.